Hello, 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 lovely friends. Today I'm starting a new series. I'm testing it out. Tradwife Reacts video, or Feminine Woman Reacts. I'm not sure what I'm going to call it. Long story short, it's a blind reaction video. If you think you would like this kind of content, please hit the like button. Leave me down below perhaps video links or suggestions. This is 100% a blind reaction, apart from the fact that I did, of course, open the link to make sure what I was going to react to. But you're going to get my actual reaction here, and we're just going to comment on it. Like I mentioned in the previous video, I'm doing videos while my kids nap, so I don't know how long it's going to be. We're just gonna go until one of them wakes up and see where it takes us. So I have it on my phone right here. Just a disclaimer, I don't know if this is the best setup, haven't edited it yet. This really is just trying it out for the first time, so thank you so much for understanding, and let's get right into it. Okay, so right off the bat, I have to say that I'm a little bit biased because I personally know Esty. I've talked to her many times on social media, and I think that regardless of how you believe she might have handled the interview or any interview that a traditional wife does online, you have to give them props and understand that it is like a very nerve-wracking situation, because you know that a lot of times in your interview, the story is going to get twisted. Even though I am a very small content creator who talks about being a traditional wife, I have honestly probably at least 20 emails of people asking me to interview, and I, as much as I have a thick skin, am too scared to do these interviews. So right off the bat, you have to give them a little bit of grace. Okay, so they're playing a lot of her TikTok, and I don't necessarily want to respond to her TikToks because I like a lot of them, and I even have comments of myself in the comment section on her TikTok supporting what she's saying, and a lot of this stuff is stuff that you can see on my channel as well. But she does mention the budgeting aspect of it. You can see through her TikToks that she does take this very serious. And unfortunately, when you choose to be a wife and a mother as your career, as your vocation, as what you want to put your effort in because it brings you satisfaction, people are so quick to jump on and criticize that. And that's a lot of what she's trying to get at with her videos. She's also about to mention, actually, let's see, make sure I'm correct. So she is talking about the apron, and they probably chose that because it goes along with her aesthetic. She has a very 1950s style aesthetic, and I mentioned this before. It's not cosplaying like a lot of people try to say traditional wives are, or like a kink. That's extremely insulting. And by the way, the people who say things like kink are the same people who are talking about sexual liberation and freedom. But ironically, if you technically have a kink for 1950s housewife, that's not allowed. Anyway, but it's definitely not a kink, okay? Is what I'm trying to get at. I think that they probably chose the apron thing because it goes along with, like she said, the uniform. And there's a practical aspect of it. When I started wearing aprons, it was just to honestly wash my hands and on the aprons. But then I realized that they help me feel feminine. Lately, I've been doing a lot of exercising. So I've actually been wearing my exercise clothing going right into cooking. And then when I'm going right into cooking, I'm putting on an apron, and it still helps me feel feminine. And back to what I was saying about the aesthetic, it's not about copying and cosplaying, but a lot of women are drawn to the last time in a more modern context. So when we had certain technologies, when we had vehicles, and we lived as closely as possible as what we live today, a time where the homemaker was valued, and we can actually see it in print and ads and stuff like that. A lot of us, of course, will revert to that because it's the closest picture in time, is what I'm trying to say. Of course, there are elements of a lifestyle in the 1800s or even civilizations before then that are admirable. Like I've mentioned many times on this channel, it's about taking the past, what we have learned, and bringing it into the future, leaving behind the bad stuff. But not everybody wants to dress like the Victorian era or like some sort of nomad tribe. You can pick the aesthetic that you please, but that's one of the reasons why a lot of us gravitate towards more of the 1950s aesthetic. It's not copying, it just is the closest time period to where we are now. Okay, so what she's essentially getting at is what I was talking about at the beginning, that it is a role that is very honorable, and she mentions that somebody has to do it regardless. And a big conversation that I find on the other side of people attacking traditional wives is that they degrade that kind of domestic labor in the process. And I mentioned this before, that if you don't respect and hold the traditional wife in seriousness, then you are also simultaneously insulting all the women who have jobs that bring in monetary value, such as nannies, daycares. I've talked about in the past couple weeks how there are so many women who talk about doing it all, like I do it all. I go outside of the house and I work, and then I also take care of kids. And I wanted to bring light to the fact that you aren't necessarily doing it all, because you are outsourcing the hours that you bring your children to daycare. And by you saying that you do it all, you're essentially devaluing the labor that the daycare workers do. And what Estee is trying to talk about is that those roles are vital to the functioning of a family, and it's honorable if you choose them and should be taken seriously. Now, also, the argument of Tradwives on social media, and they make money from this. This is one that just grinds my gears, and I keep talking about it and people just ignore what I have to say or gloss over it. For example, my kids are napping right now. I am going to be taking an hour to get through as much of this video as I possibly can. This is a hobby for me. This is something that I do for fun, that is fulfilling to me. And if I weren't doing this particular hobby, I would be doing something else, because it's so important for women and for people to have hobbies. You'd be taking that hour to sew something, or even if you have an eccentric hobby like collecting, or if you're a gamer, it doesn't matter what your hobby is. Mine just happens to be this, along with the other traditional wives on here, and putting it on the internet, turning the button to make ads doesn't detract from the fact that it's still a hobby. And if your video gets 1 million views or it gets 10 views, you don't have control over that. You're just putting your message out there. And again, the concept, you're doing your hobby. And this is my personal opinion. Perhaps being a social media influencer has gotten warped, but it is definitely, again, my personal opinion, it is nothing. Even if I did this full time, doing videos all day long, like as an actual job, it would be nothing compared to the other jobs that I've had in the past. And I've also gotten criticism before that like I didn't have real jobs. I don't know how these people even knew that, but I had real jobs before. So you do get a lot of criticism, especially if you are somebody who's on TikTok. That's her main social media platform. At least that's where she started. So you get a lot of like, people just feel as though they're safer on TikTok to say incredibly horrible things. I've seen many comments of people, other women, saying that they hope that she's left with nothing, that her husband cheats on her, that her husband is unalived. Very, very horrible things. And you do have a wonderful community though of people supporting, because we know how isolating it feels to live this kind of lifestyle. And I've also talked about the difference between traditional wife and stay-at-home mom. Even though you can be a traditional wife and a stay-at-home mom, there is a little bit of a difference there. So although not everybody's values are going to completely overlap, there's a difference. Anyway, go watch my other traditional wife videos and you'll understand. So living the traditional wife before you have kids, if you have the blessing to do that, or to like diminish your workload in preparation, it is an awesome lifestyle. I know she doesn't have kids yet and she's just basking in being newly married. It is a really good and relaxing life, and they're making fun of the fact that she takes an hour and a half to put on her makeup, but if you have that time and you're able to live more of a relaxed lifestyle and do that, I don't see why not. She also talks about only having one pair of sweatpants, and people think that is so radical, but the point of it is, like I mentioned in previous videos that I have made, it's just to kind of like get yourself a new standard of how you want to dress, and just a part of her uniform. It helps her feel productive and more confident and more beautiful. You only get one life to live. If you want to do if you have the time and you can do your makeup for an hour and a half, then so be it. And you want to dress to the nines every single day, go for it. You only live one life. And another thing is, I think a lot of people like to, talk about traditional wives and paint this picture of them being lazy because they have a lot of leisure time. And even if somebody does have a lot of leisure time, I think there's such a big discrepancy with this idea of how we are supposed to live right now, which is like overworked, overburdened, having a lot of different roles, grinding, being burnt out. So when you see something in the other direction, it's just so shocking. And a lot of people, to cope with their reality of the reality of what they're living, they want to degrade it. But also everything comes with sacrifice. Like she mentioned at the beginning of the video, she doesn't go out and buy a coffee every single day. She's also talked about in the past how she's downsized places because they're trying to save more money and things are so much more expensive. There are a lot of sacrifices. I've also seen videos where people are making fun of the cooking, Tradwife cooking, like they don't have good cooking skills because they make stuff in the crock pot. I think that is just ignoring the fact that to make something gourmet at home, a lot of times you need specific ingredients, and this doesn't mean the traditional wife is not a good cook, but a lot of times you're working with the budget, and cutting down on the budget through the avenue of food is one of the easiest ways that you can do so. A lot of people are feeling pinched right now in groceries, so no, you're not going to see like this fancy mushroom dish that is extremely gourmet made by a traditional wife. That doesn't mean that they don't have the ability to make that gourmet meal, but everything is a sacrifice, and you also have the big aspect of budget. And then those of us who have kids, you get the point here. So she talks about submission. That's another way that people try to degrade traditional wives, and there are many more amazing Christian women on the internet who go deep into that. But when you are living in terms of biblical submission, it's not master-slave relationship. Submission to a man who puts his family first, who wants the well-being of your soul and your entire being, essentially, is not a slavery relationship at all. It is something where you can actually rest in your femininity, knowing that he has your best intention and he wants you to be the best that you can, and he's going to take care of you. That is a relationship that we have in this household as well. Of course, every marriage has arguments, all that kind of stuff, but in general, I know that my husband is putting the family first, so I can trust him and I can relax in that. So I do want to touch on the fact that they talk about their arrangement, doesn't have to lift a finger type of thing. And there isn't just one right way to go about it, but for many people, they find simplicity in the traditional lifestyle, and the purpose is that you do not feel burnt out in your role. And many women, for us taking on this domestic responsibility and understanding that our husbands take care of the rest is the division of labor that we like the most. Now, of course, there are times, concessions that you have to make in postpartum or when you're sick, etc., etc. But in general, knowing what your role is 95 or 90% of the time makes for a clear, business model, so to speak, of your marriage. I might make a couple $100s on social media. I can financially contribute to the family with my hobby. You might sell something at a craft show and be able to financially contribute a little bit to your family. But at the end of the day, the responsibility of the bills is not on you, and that is a traditional structure. A lot of us enjoy that. We want to do that. And you also have to think of a business model. I'm not saying that two working parents can't work. We live in a time where that is a reality for many different people, but there is a lot of confusion and a lack of simplicity in that for those people as well. So you have to have very clear communication when you do that. That is not my reality, so I'm not going to lecture on what you have to do there. But if I were working outside of the home, of course I couldn't do 90% of the domestic tasks, and that would be also wrong if I did that. To me, I also agree with that. And they're also coming back to the concept of she's trusting him. She knows that he has the best interest of her at heart, and she married somebody who wants the best for their family. So she feels comfortable allowing for him to be the leader. It's not oppressive if you are willingly trusting somebody like this, and this is something that you want. It's actually very, very smart. They talked about it right off the bat. They both knew what they wanted, and they didn't waste time. That's one of the biggest things that I see modern women now complaining about others wasting time. And here you have a man who's not wasting Estee's time, and he's telling her what he wants, and that ended up being what she wants, and they're working together for the common mission of what they want together. So I understand what he's saying here. When you are in a marriage with somebody that you truly care about, in a healthy marriage, you essentially know each other so well, and it doesn't mean that he's ignoring what she wants. They probably had a conversation about it, but he automatically takes into account what he knows her opinion is or what she would want, because he knows her so well. My husband knows everything about without me. And a lot of times he can make a decision without me consulting. He doesn't usually. He always asks me my opinion, even if he has an idea of what he's going to do, or he just like lets me know what he's going to do. But the communication and the level that we are on is just so clear. And I find that because there's a lot of trust in traditional relationships, what they seem like from the outside is like that one person is just controlling everything, but it really is like a mutual thing. And there's a lot of like unspoken day-to-day things that happen just because that trust is so strong. And because the best interest really is for the family, the husband is putting you first, but it's not in the dictatorial way that we see more so in the way that a modern relationship is depicted. Exactly. So he just said that he wants to make her happy. He is right. This is a side note, but when we moved from the suburbs to Montreal for a year, we're no longer there right now. But I thought that it was the same that it was in 2016, and it's not. It feels incredibly dangerous right now. And I used to, in 2016 when I lived there, just as a side note, walk in like the middle of the night, not the middle of the night, but like late at night by myself, and I felt okay. And I don't know if that's because like my frontal lobe wasn't developed. I doubt it. But right now, the world that we live in is incredibly dangerous, especially in cities. And when you have kids, something ignites in your brain as well. You're on constant alert. And I prefer having my husband with me. We do go grocery shopping now together. I am in charge of like what I'm going to buy for the meals, but he comes with us just as a measure of safety, and it's become like a nice little family outing as well. So I do think that in a traditional role, there's a lot of responsibility on the husband because he knows that he has to financially provide, but also be like that rock, the spiritual aspect in your relationship. And then that grows a lot of masculinity because you have that responsibility. So I think what he's getting at here is the modern relationship doesn't allow necessarily for that to bloom because we live more so in a self-centered role. I'm not saying that a modern marriage can't work, but what we see in a lot of modern marriages now is two people coming together for marriage, but not truly coming together, just living their lives parallel to each other, not creating a life together for the betterment of the family. And that is like having one foot out of the door. It doesn't mean that in a traditional relationship you can't have arguments. My husband and I, we're both sort of hard-headed, and that's a lot of what we've had to overcome in our relationship and learn how to have arguments better for our style of relationship. But at the end of the day, we don't have one foot outside the door because we know why we came together, and we know that the family is our number one priority in a traditional relationship. And that has caused for our love to bloom deeper than I had ever even imagined. And so he harped back on like that is what they chose for their family. So that's not necessarily a lifestyle of her working out of the home that they chose together. And she was talking about how when you do have kids, that definitely opens up a new facet of how busy you are and what you are fulfilled by. There is so much that you can do as a traditional wife if that's what you chose. And for many of us, we feel more freedom doing that because we can invest in our hobbies. Like I mentioned before, I am a huge nerd and I'm able to learn what I want to learn. I have a new Audible credit. I'm going to download like this sciencey book about longevity that I'm so excited to listen to. I'm very into podcasts that hyperanalyze certain topics that I don't think I can mention on YouTube without it getting flagged. But the possibilities really are endless if that is what you want. And so destigmatizing something that, like Esty mentioned, has been popular for many years, or maybe that was her husband who mentioned it, is an important aspect in order to truly care about all women. We only have the conversation going in one direction, and we've also oriented our society economically in the direction of a two-income household that is very problematic and is a big barrier to women being able to stay home with their children if that is what they want. If I were working outside the home, I would probably be going into teaching, for example. My mother was a teacher, but long story short, I want to homeschool my kids, and for me, putting my kids to be taught by somebody else while I go teach other people's kids isn't fulfilling for me. There are teachers who do have kids who love teaching other kids and they feel like it's necessary for them to have a break to do so, but that is not the lifestyle that I have chosen and that my husband has chosen, and we are united in one mission in making that happen. A little point that I want to specify is that of course circumstances of life do change. Sometimes people have to bring in income, or like, you know, maybe the homeschool thing won't work out for my family. But in general, my husband and I have come to an agreement together as a traditional family, and so wanting that and expecting that of each other is natural, with making concessions for reality of everyday life and obstacles that come along the way. So apparently there is a part 2 where we hear from the critics. This video has gone on for long enough, so I'm going to end it there. Maybe I will pick it up and do the part 2 so we can talk more about the critics and see what they have to say. Again, like the video if you do, leave your comments down below. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.